Chief Executive, thank you very much. We'll open it to questions from the floor. So who would like to ask a initial question? Yes, please.
Mrs. Lam, thank you. Chief Executive, thank you very much. Chief Executive, thank you very much for your speech. I'll ask a simple question. What is keeping you up at night? What are the things that really worry you? I know that you've talked about your manifesto, but what are things that you really feel that you might need help from all of us in the business industry that keep you up at night? Thank you.
An honest answer is I sleep through the night.
That's good.
I'm so exhausted every day that I fall asleep within the length of a song, because I switch on the radio. I just can't finish a song and then I fall asleep. But on a serious note, I think it's this confidence issue. I will be very worried if Hong Kong people are losing confidence in themselves, in the city, in the government, in the nation. Because without confidence, a lot of things just won't happen. And I hate to see Hong Kong people or Hong Kong as a city sort of belittling herself. Oh, that we can't do this, or we cannot compete, and so on and so on. Because Hong Kong is still a very good place with a lot of strategic advantages, with wonderful people, with very good institutions. So there's absolutely no room for this sort of inferiority. We should be very proud, very confident to move on.
But by the way, before we go on, we do have some breaking news that the 4 legislators have been disqualified by the court. You got elected on a platform of building bridges. How can, when those sort of decisions are happening, is it going to make it that much more difficult for you to build bridges?
No, but building bridges still has to be done in a lawful way. I don't think the chief executive or any government official should sort of compromise on the rule of law just because we want to be friendly. Okay, so but I'm sure the judicial process will go on for a while.
So let's say that there's an appeal. I think there will be an appeal,
I'm sure,
and then there would have to be elections, right, to replace.
After the judicial process has been completed.
But you wouldn't intervene in any of that process to just say, hang on, can we come to a, you know, I'm the new chief executive and perhaps we can work this out? You wouldn't think of that? No?
No.
Okay. Who else has a question? Yes, please.
Hi, you mentioned earlier about bringing innovative approach to your government, and that's a core theme. But if you look at your appointments in your cabinet, you have been criticized for lack of diversity in your appointment in the media. Can you talk about how will you bring innovative approach if you don't bring in different perspectives in your core cabinet members?
Oh, okay. Well, first is I believe in leadership. So the team is important, but the team leader is even more important. So it is now very much my duty and obligation to drive innovation within the government. I've worked in the government for 37 years, and I do have a little bit of reputation of being somebody who's not traditional and conventional. I try to make breakthroughs in some of the policies I've done. Second thing is we need advisors. We need people to work with us. So within the Executive Council, I do have very experienced people who could help us. And then thirdly is we want to work with all of you. So I've said that in the many government boards and committees, we love to have talented people to come in to serve the committees. And fourthly, I know young people are normally more creative, not abiding by the rules. So I said that in a unit called the Central Policy Unit, which I will reorganize, I will find room to appoint about 20, 30 young people, really young people from different political backgrounds to join the government on a contract to provide the feedback to us, to look at our policies, and also to have a better feel of how government policies are formulated. So that later on, if they go out to contest in elections to become a district council or legislative council members, at least they have some basis to work on.
Who else?
We all have heroes and people we aspire towards to be. Who do you look at a political level as being somebody, past or present, who look up and respect immensely and like to follow in terms of success?
Oh, I don't have much time to read books these days, but when I have time and in past, I do love books about which are biographies or autobiographies, because it's always good to learn from the great people. So I got a few books on Lee Kuan Yew. I got a very good book on the former Secretary of State of America, Colin Powell. And I love Angela Merkel as well. So it's that sort of people who, I'm not saying that I will entirely follow their philosophy thing, but these are really the great people who have turned things around and who give people hope and confidence.
Thanks very much for your comments, Chief Executive. You've always made it clear that the international business community makes an important contribution to Hong Kong. But one of the big issues for the international business community is the cost of doing business in Hong Kong, of rents, of education, etc. How do you think you can change that? Is there any way you can lower costs for companies operating here, for example?
In my capacity as the Chief Secretary for Administration, in the last 4.5 years, I did chair the IBC, the International Business Committee. So I have first-hand feedback from the International Business Committee on things that they worry in coming to invest, to work in Hong Kong. And normally is in that order: international school places, air quality, cost of living, particularly rental and home prices, and so on. So we try to tackle these issues one by one. By now, if I bump into a foreign chamber president, he would tell me that international school places are now lesser of a worry because of a policy of the government to increase the supply of international schools in the last 5 or 6 years. But school fees are not something we could control. This is a free market, and these are private schools now. As far as air quality is concerned, I hope you will realize that it's generally improving, particularly through this initiative to phase out 85,000 commercial diesel vehicles from the roads. Property prices is something we have just discussed. Even our local people are finding it difficult to buy and to rent. Then it's a big issue that we need to address generally. I can't make a special arrangement for the international business community. But you will read from the newspapers, there's a very interesting project called InnoCell. And that is a special housing arrangement for the tech people in the science park. Because in order to attract the technology and the R&D people into the science park, they realize that this housing issue has to be addressed. So we are encouraging and even giving a piece of land to the science park to build flats, which are exclusively for scientists and for researchers working in the science park. Yeah.
Other questions? Sorry, yeah.
On the housing market, and I remember that you mentioned that there will be some first home, apartment for the middle class, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us some more color about, say, in terms of what that means, some key benchmark, for example, what prices, what, how that means household income multiple, etc. So make it the people, Hong Kong people, can more affordable to buy this apartment. Thank you.
Housing is very important. I promise in my manifesto that I will do everything I could to build a housing ladder for families in Hong Kong. So if you look at the present housing ladder, there's a sort of missing rank there. It's beyond HOS, home ownership scheme, because I think the four-person family income limit for HOS flat is about 45,000 a month. But honestly, if there's a family or a working couple earning 60,000 a month, it's still very difficult to buy. So I said that I will introduce a new form of subsidized housing for sale called the starter homes. So it's first time flat for Hong Kong permanent residents. So being a starter home, so you could not expect it to be a very luxurious or very spacious, maybe about 500 square feet, 2-bedroom type of flat. But I need to find the land because I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. In other words, if I take away land from the public housing or from the HOS or from the green forms to build this starter home, then there's an equity issue because these people are the more grassroots families. So I said that when I find a new source of land, which I'm finding, and there are some good prospects, then I will start to pilot and build these starter homes. And as far as the pricing, I will look at affordability instead of look at the market premium. Well, definitely above HOS, but how high you go then is a question to be deliberated. No, 10 times. 10 times will be less than 1% of the Hong Kong population. Yeah.
Who else? Yeah.
Chief Executive, there's a perception, I think, in the financial industry that, in the past decade, Hong Kong's becoming, very dependent on China. And there are some in the industry who really wants to see Hong Kong, obviously those of us who live here would like Hong Kong to flourish, to play more of a leading role in the development of the region. So I think your visit to Singapore is much welcomed. And I'm just thinking, have you given some thought about this? Because I think there is sort of a concern that Hong Kong's gravitating mostly to China, and yet it can really play a bigger role in the region.
Well, with the growing of the Chinese economy over the last few decades, this sort of phenomenon, which you describe as over-reliant China, to me is only natural. We are the first mover. We are taking this first mover advantage of the opening up of the Chinese economy. But of course, looking ahead, I agree entirely with you that we should go beyond China and look at the region and perhaps the world. And that's why the initiative of Belt and Road becomes significant, because it is countries along the Belt and Road all the way to Africa. And then as far as the region, ASEAN is very important to us. Actually, now ASEAN is our second largest trading partner in terms of merchandise. And Hong Kong will be signing a free trade agreement with ASEAN later this year. So that will set the scene for us to enhance our already quite close relationship with ASEAN. And from ASEAN, then we of course want to tap into the RCEP, the Regional Cooperation of Economic Partnership, that is ASEAN plus 6, I think, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand, and Australia. And we also just started a negotiation with Australia on a Hong Kong-Australia FTA. So things are happening.
And Brexit, does that present opportunities or problems?
Depending on how hard or how soft Brexit is going to be. But of course, there's always opportunity, especially with the very unique historical relationship between Hong Kong and the United Kingdom. And that's why in September I'm going to London.
I mean, you personally still have fairly close ties with the UK, right? There was talk at some stage of you even retiring there.
I have severed all the ties. No, those ties stem from my son's education. They were educated in the United Kingdom. But now I have no property, I have no relative.
There's no little country cottage with a fence.
No, also.
Sorry.
Hi there. I was just wondering what measures you're going to put in place to protect the environment in Hong Kong over the next 5 years.
The physical environment.
Not the physical environment, just the natural environment, maybe a recycling policy or reducing packaging.
Oh, okay. Well, in the last 5 years, my colleague, the Secretary for Environment, whom I worked with very closely before he joined government, he was a green architect previously. So in the last 5 years, we have rolled out a few blueprints. So it's not just ad hoc measures or short-term measures. Every strategy is a blueprint on reducing municipal waste, on improving air quality, on saving energy, on biodiversity. So we now have quite a few blueprints that we need to fully implement. So waste reduction is a very important thing. because we just could not find any more place for landfilling. And finding sites to build incinerators is equally difficult, if not contentious. So it has to start with reducing, reusing, and recycling. So I used to chair a steering committee on promoting recycling in Hong Kong with tax incentive, with things like that. We're happy to look more deeply into those areas. Yeah.
Chief Executive, you mentioned that you would like to see stronger leadership in financial services sector. Could you share your vision on how to further develop the financial services industry in Hong Kong?
Yeah. If you want more details, you go to my manifesto on my website. There are several important areas. One is, of course, we have to recognize that financial services are there to support the economy. So if we are able to diversify our economy, then we need more financial services support. Second thing is we need to have smart regulation. So we cannot just regulate for the sake of regulation and make it so difficult even to open a bank account, for example. And then there are new areas. Matthias just mentioned one, that is fintech. The other area is green financing. I see a lot of potential for Hong Kong to do more on green financing, government issuing green bonds, for example. And then there's the area of internationalization of the renminbi, the issue of more renminbi dim sum bonds in Hong Kong and so on, and also with the Muslim bonds, the Sukuk bonds and so on and so on. So there's a host of issues that we could follow up on the financial sector. That's why you need stronger leadership in order to push those areas. Over the last 4.5 years, I think insufficient credit has not been given to an institution called the FSDC, the Financial Services Development Council, chaired by Mrs. Laura Cha. They have produced over 30 reports. I just have time to read a few. And they have very specific recommendations for us to take forward in various aspects. So what we now need to do in this term of government is to properly resource the FSDC and to ensure that the relevant bureaus and departments will act accordingly to those recommendations.
Thank you, CE. For all of us who've made our home in Hong Kong, it was very welcome that you've put more money into education announced on your first day in office. Can you give us a little bit more detail on how you're going to make our kids happier over the next 5 years?
This is the job of the parents to make the kids happy. You cannot delegate that duty to me. Well, of course.
Is that what a free market is?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Of course, this first batch of quality education initiatives, which we're going to spend an extra $3.6 billion every year, is to better resource the schools so that teachers have more time with the students and so on and so on. But the more important areas of work in terms of education, to provide that more conducive environment for kids to be able to enjoy learning, to be inspired by education, is something that we have not started. Those are the important things. We have only addressed the short-term, immediate things that will provide some relief to the schools and the teachers. So looking at the curriculum, creating more room and space for kids to learn other things than acquisition of knowledge. Actually, these days, I don't know why you have to learn to acquire knowledge. You can just Google, and you get all the information at your fingertips. But to give kids more room to imagine, just to imagine and to dream, and more time for sports, for arts, and so on and so on. And then you need to look at the evaluation and the assessment system. How could we move away from this sort of very stringent assessment system? And then we look at the university admission, whether we really need to require this scoring in a very specified types of subjects and so on. So there's a host of issues that we will address. But I really want to make an appeal to those of you in the audience who are young parents, you still have young kids, try to trust your kid and give them the freedom to do the things they want to do, even just sit there and just dream about. My younger son is a very brilliant mathematician, but when he was young, he was very dull, boring. He just sat there, and I don't push him to learn violin or take private tutorial lessons. I just let him sit there and think about his figures and things, and that's my personal experience. I just want to share this with you.
So you were the original anti-tiger mum.
Yes, very much, very much.
And this is the anti-tiger mum manifesto, it almost sounds like. You may get...
Happy to.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up here. One final question from me. 1997, we had a financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. 2008, not to be too foreboding, but how resilient would Hong Kong be if there was, say, a downturn in China?
I think over the years, as a result of these financial crises and tsunami and whatnot, we have strengthened our institutions. But crises are crises, and things are unpredictable. So we need really to sort of rehearse all our contingency plans. I also wrote this into my manifesto, prompted by Mr. Joseph Yam. He said that we need to gear up to prepare for this sort of thing. And so as a result of that prompter, I persuaded Joseph to come back to help. So he's now a member of my executive council. So I think his involvement will give people a lot of confidence because of his very strong financial skills and network.
And that means more focus on financial reserves and saving for a rainy day.
On the institutions, on the robustness of the institutions to stand that sort of shock should it happen.
Okay. Chief Executive, thank you very much for joining us today.